Sinkholes are created when the rock layer below the Earth's surface collapses, causing a large chasm to form. They can happen by surprise, in cities, farms, even in car dealerships. Let's take a look at 15 surprise sinkholes. Number 15. Russian sinkhole. Imagine you're driving in the car, minding your own business during your typical morning commute, when all of a sudden, the earth opens up beneath you, trying to swallow you whole. Well, that's exactly what's happening here. The surprise sinkhole occurred in Russia right in the middle of the road, and as you can see, no one was hurt, but the way people are just driving around it makes it seem like this is an everyday occurrence. It all starts with people noticing a depression in the road and simply driving around it, trying not to get too close. But surely another crack in the road forms and the earth begins to give way and eventually collapses, with one car missing a total disaster by an inch. And finally, boom, the rest follows. Luckily, some people came by to put one small orange barrier there to keep people out. But despite the sheer size of the hole, it doesn't seem to bother the other motorists as they simply drive by like nothing happened. They must be in a rush. Number 14. 2007 Guatemala sinkhole. Another place with a high risk of sinkholes happening is Guatemala, and while a sinkhole isn't uncommon, they are still incredibly unpredictable, so chances are you won't know where their next one will strike until it's too late. The 2007 Guatemala sinkhole is absolutely massive, reaching a haunting depth of 330 feet. This is another classic case of human activity having devastating consequences, with the sinkhole being caused by fluid from the sewers, eroding uncemented volcanic ash, limestone, and pyroclastic deposits that live underneath Guatemala City. So combine all of that underground instability with excessive rainstorms and the water seeping its way deep underground to dissolve the rock, and you've got a recipe for utter disaster. Nearby citizens even said they could hear a rumbling near the site of the sinkhole just before the collapse. When you have a sinkhole in such a densely populated area, it's virtually impossible for people to walk away unscathed, and unfortunately 5 people lost their lives, and 1,000 people needed to be evacuated. All in all, it cost the Guatemalan government $2.7 million not just to fill the sinkhole with cement, but to also redirect the sewage pipes. Number 13. Louisiana sinkhole. It's easy to associate sinkholes with dry land, but there are plenty that have formed underneath bodies of water, both large and small. And while it may be scary to witness one in your neighborhood, if one forms while you're out on the water like these people, then you better get out of there fast because that sinkhole is going to take as much water with it as it can. This one happened in 2013 on the Bayou Corn in Louisiana, and as you can see, things go from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. What starts out as a calm scene quickly turns to calamity as the lake bed opens up, taking water and even the trees with it. And just like that, it's over. But what's even crazier to think about is just imagine how deep that sinkhole must have been to swallow up such tall trees. It looks like they're being devoured by an undersea creature, and since the water's way too murky to see what's going on beneath the surface, it may as well have been. Number 12. Bracken Cave. This next sinkhole is surprising in a much different way. Bracken Cave in Texas is the summer home to bats, but we're not talking about 10, 20, or even 1,000 bats. Each year, 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats come here to roost from March to October, making this the largest concentration of mammals on the planet. The cave is just 100 feet wide and lies at the bottom of a sinkhole where the roof collapsed decades ago. Luckily for the bats, though, Bracken Cave and the 1,500 acres it sits on are all owned by the Bat Conservation Unit, which means these bats always have a safe place to stay. The organization also maintains and restores the vegetation and wildlife in the area, ensuring that these roosting bats can keep coming back year after year. These bats make their annual 1,000-mile trip from Mexico to Bracken Cave to give birth to their pups, and 500 of these baby bats can fit on 1 square foot of the cave wall. And when they do finally emerge, it's quite the sight, to say the least. All of a sudden, the sky is riddled with bats, and it's almost impossible to hear anything over the sounds of their wings flapping. The conservationist group also offers tours of the caves so that anyone lucky enough to go can witness the phenomenal event. Number 11. Morning Glory Spillway. What's the story, Morning Glory? Lake Berryessa in California is home to the Morning Glory Spillway, a hole that at first glance looks like the doorway to some eldritch realm. Well, don't be too frightened though, because it's just one massive hole constantly pulling water in, almost like an infinity pool. And while this is actually a man-made spillway, it acts very much as a sinkhole would. The Morning Glory Spillway is fed by the Monticello Dam, and whenever the water level rises above 440 feet, away it goes. Down the hole and into the Putah Creek hundreds of feet below. It's a pretty amazing sight, and it's no wonder that people come from all over to check out this one-of-a-kind sinkhole. And because the conditions need to be just right for the water to flow, which is why the Morning Glory Spillway can only be seen in its, well, glory a few times a year. The spillway is a classic example of humans imitating Mother Nature. Number 10. Thor's Well. With a name like Thor's Well, you can be sure that this one is epic. This seemingly bottomless pit in Oregon looks like it's been draining the sea for thousands of years, and falling in will take you straight to the Earth's core. Well, no one knows for sure how Thor's Well was made, but many scientists agree that it was once a cave created by the pounding waves against the rock, whose roof eventually collapsed, creating this giant hole. There's also an opening at the very bottom which allows for some amazing ocean sprays out of the top opening. Thor's Well is most photogenic during the high tides, but the torrents make getting too close all the more dangerous. But despite how it may seem, Thor's Well isn't actually bottomless and most likely goes down for about 20 feet. Despite the level of tourism it attracts, Thor's Well is best viewed from a distance, a very, very far distance. Number 9. Mumbai Sinkhole. Sinkholes can happen after incredibly heavy rains, and the constant flow of water seeping into the ground can cause it to lose its integrity and give way to the ground opening right up. That's exactly what happened here in Mumbai. The entire scene is absolutely crazy. His car was parked, just minding its own business, until a sinkhole opened up just beneath the front, and as you can see, it takes a total nosedive, sticking its trunk right into the air as it's slowly swallowed up by the earth, until it eventually just disappears. Luckily, no one got hurt, seeing as how the car was empty. And how would you possibly know that you parked your car right over a sinkhole? Unbeknownst to the vehicle's owners, the site of the sinkhole was right on top of an old well that was covered when the parking lot was built. The local authorities were called immediately and managed to fish the car out of the sinkhole, with the entire process taking about 12 hours. The odds of parking your car over a sinkhole, 1 in a million. The odds of that car ever running again? 1 in 2 million. Number 8. The Dead Sea Sinkholes. You may have heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but have you ever heard of the Dead Sea Sinkholes? The Dead Sea has the lowest point on the surface of the Earth, at about 1,400 feet below sea level, but it also happens to be one of the coolest places on Earth, and if you ever get the chance to visit, you'll be amazed at how well you're able to float in the water. Just make sure you don't get the water in your eyes. But the Dead Sea has also been receding at an alarming rate for decades, resulting in sinkholes forming when you least expect it. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 surprise sinkholes, but thousands of them. The area has plenty of resorts and spas that aim to utilize the healing properties of the Dead Sea salt, but many of them have been destroyed as the earth unexpectedly gives away underneath them. All that's left now are ghost towns. As you may expect, the receding of the Dead Sea is caused by humans and climate change. And while the damage can never be undone, it's never too late to stop it. Number 7. Land O'Lakes. The state of Florida has seen its fair share of sinkholes, but there's one in particular that puts the rest to shame, and it unfortunately came at a very great cost. The sinkhole in Land O'Lakes occurred in 2017 and started out small but grew larger than anyone could have possibly anticipated. Initially, the Land O'Lakes sinkhole was only large enough to swallow up a boat in a residential neighborhood, but it grew and grew and grew until it eventually destroyed 7 homes. In the end, the Land O'Lakes sinkhole reached 240 feet across and was 50 feet deep. Sure, a sinkhole can occur naturally out in the wild, but when it happens so often in a place like Land O'Lakes, blaming it on human activity isn't out of the ordinary. Heavy groundwater pumping for irrigation and residential taps, and even above-ground work can weaken and destabilize the limestone below, causing it to prematurely give way. And unfortunately, in the case of Land O'Lakes, a lot of people lost their homes in a very short period of time as they fell into the sinkhole and were submerged in the water that came gushing in. And to add insult to injury, while the city may have filled the sinkhole shortly thereafter, not much else was done to clean the area and make it habitable once again. Number 6. National Corvette Museum. While the cars managed to steer clear from the previous Russian sinkhole, the cars in our next entry weren't so lucky. Back in 2014, Kentucky's National Corvette Museum fell victim to a nasty sinkhole that managed to take 8 Corvettes with it. Fortunately, though, no one was harmed, as both the cars and the museum were empty, but the damages cost a pretty penny. A brand new Corvette is going to run you over 60 grand, and that's on the cheap side. So just imagine having to multiply that number by 8 after all these cars fell into this unexpected 30-foot deep sinkhole. The museum was actually able to turn the lemons into lemonade, because not only were all 8 cars recovered, albeit covered in dirt and pretty banged up, but the event was also celebrated. So once the sinkhole was filled in, the cars were kept as is and unwashed and put on display, perhaps not only to show the resiliency of a Corvette, but to also show off the absurdity of such a surprising event. Number 5. Berezniki. Having your property destroyed by a surprise sinkhole is one thing, but what about when an entire city succumbs to them? Well, that's exactly what happened to Berezniki in Russia. The city of Berezniki sits in the Ural Mountains of Russia, and it's sinking more and more into the earth with each passing day. So what exactly is going on here? Well, poor city planning is what happened, because the city was built entirely on top of a mine, which needless to say is completely unsustainable, with the only things actually holding up the mine ceiling being salt pillars, which you can probably imagine isn't quite enough to keep an entire city standing. By 2006, the waters of a nearby freshwater spring began to flow throughout the mine about 1,500 feet below the surface, slowly dissolving the pillars. And everything came crashing down from there, literally. Many of the residential and business districts have been affected by the several sinkholes that plague Berezniki, with the largest of them being nicknamed the Grandfather, which is about 1,300 feet across and nearly 700 feet deep. Number 4. Boiling Sinkhole. The place, Penza, Russia. The year, 2019. It was a Tuesday morning when a sinkhole opened up in the middle of the street as the cars were still rolling by. However, there were 2 unlucky motorists whose car went nose first into the sinkhole. But this wasn't your ordinary sinkhole. This one was filled with water that reached a temperature of 167 degrees Fahrenheit, which is close to the boiling point. But why was this sinkhole filled with hot water? Hot water runs into the homes of Russia via underground pipes, so when the sinkhole forms, these pipes burst, spilling their contents into the hole. And as you can see, the driver was unable to avoid the spill, and both he and the passenger were all but boiled alive. Responders said that the 2 men lost their lives almost instantly. It's an incredibly tragic story and a frightening reminder that when it comes to major cities, sinkholes can pop up anywhere and bring a ton of destruction along with them. Number 3. San Francisco, 1995 sinkhole. During its history, the city of San Francisco, California, has had a tumultuous relationship with the ground that it sits on. There have been plenty of earthquakes, with the city managing to rebuild over the rubble. And in 1995, in the Seacliff neighborhood, one nasty surprise sinkhole opened up and took a classic home with it in a matter of seconds. Luckily, the house was unoccupied at the time, but the damages were quite expensive. After a major downpour had occurred the morning before, the older sewer line felt the pressure and finally burst, causing the ground to open up and engulf the home. The city needed to quickly shut off all the utilities in the area to avoid any explosions and fires, and in the end, another 23 residences needed to be evacuated for fear that the sinkhole would spread. Number 2. Fukuoka Sinkhole. Fukuoka is a beautiful prefecture on the north shore of Japan's Kyushu Island. It's known for its old temples, beaches, hospitality, and of course, superb cuisine. But in 2016, Fukuoka also became the home of a massive sinkhole right in the middle of a busy 4-lane intersection. The sinkhole was nearly 100 feet wide and about 50 feet deep. Because the sinkhole happened in such a busy area, the local government needed to react fast because subway tunnels were destroyed and water flooded into the hole. But the response was incredibly swift, and workers rushed to the scene to evacuate the area and close off the road to all traffic. Fortunately, the gas pipelines were shut off just in time to avoid any fires, and the sewage system was bypassed to prevent any sewage from flooding into the sinkhole. Believe it or not, there were thankfully no injuries here, and even more amazing is the fact that the city of Fukuoka was able to completely fix the sinkhole in just a week. Now when you look at the site, it's as if nothing ever happened. Number 1. The Great Blue Hole. A massive sinkhole that's best viewed from above, the Great Blue Hole is exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant hole over 1,000 feet wide and 400 feet deep in the middle of the ocean in Belize. It gets its deep blue color from the depth, which, juxtaposed from the crystal clear waters around it, makes it look like the eye of an otherworldly beast that's been lying dormant for thousands of years, just waiting to swallow unsuspecting swimmers whole. But the Great Blue Hole is part of the gorgeous Belize Barrier Reef and Mesoamerican Reef, so it's a huge hotspot for scuba divers. But with a hole that deep, who knows what sort of deep-sea creatures are staring back at you? It's widely believed that the hole was formed way back in the Ice Age, when a submerged limestone cave system collapsed when the sea levels began to change. If you do manage to swim down to the depths of the Blue Hole, you'll find that massive stalactites and stalagmites abound that help provide researchers with vital information about the climates of the past. So not only is the Great Blue Hole a once-in-a-lifetime diving spot, it's basically an underwater natural history museum.
Watch our nature playlist for more top 15 videos about beautiful nature. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best nature videos.